You are now entering the Honeysuckle podcast. Today's episode, Andrew DeAngelo, Cannabis Consultant.
I think all use is medical, and I think that when you talk to people who are Cali Sober, for instance, and they're able to use cannabis to greatly reduce or eliminate their drinking, and you realize that people who take cannabis tend to move into areas of more balance in their lives, eventually, if you smoke enough of it. And so, that's kind of been my experience, is that cannabis is something that if you have a long enough and consistent enough relationship with it, it sort of teaches you how to be healthy in other areas of your life, or at least more balanced maybe in other areas of your life. So that's what I've seen from people who have a long relationship with the plant, by and large.
Yeah, my case is identical. You know what I mean? The more I used cannabis, the more I cleaned up my eating, the more I opened my mind up to other things. And now, when I do eat, a slice of pepperoni pizza, I'm like, whoa! Like, just how much it changes my brain.
Yeah, my brother recently became a vegan, and he talks about when now, he gradually got off animal protein, and by the end of that gradual process, the animal protein just kind of, didn't sit well with him, like that pepperoni pizza didn't sit well with you. And so, there's something about that with cannabis users, long time and consistent cannabis users tend to trend in that direction, because I think the cannabis experience, part of it is you become a little more self-aware. You become aware of everything more, right? And one of the things you become aware of more is yourself. And it's why people have these panic attacks sometimes if they've taken a high dose of cannabis, or a dose that's high for them, and or experience paranoia. They're starting to judge themselves. That internal voice is like, oh God, I shouldn't have said that to my mother last night. And then you get all panicked and scared, or I have to go to class in an hour. Oh my God, how am I going to handle myself? And then you get all panicked and scared, and these things happen to you. But it's part of the self-awareness that is the cannabis experience. So, I think you learn how to channel that self-awareness after those. We've all experienced those panic and paranoid attacks. I mean, I certainly have. And, you get through them. And then, you learn maybe, okay, that dose wasn't right for that set and setting.
Yeah.
And you learn, which dose is right for that set and setting. And then, by the time you get to middle age like me, you very rarely have one of those experiences. So it's, cannabis is a great teacher. It's just a great teacher, whether it teaches you how to be healthier, or whether it teaches you to lighten up a little bit in your life, or gain a deeper appreciation for the people you love, or the experiences that you have. Those are all things that cannabis teaches us.
Why? What is going on with this plant?
Hey man, it's a miracle plant. Those of us who love it and realize what's going on with it, that's why we say it's a miracle plant. We don't know why. The answer is science doesn't really know why. We know there's this thing called the endocannabinoid system. We know there's these receptors in the brain. It appears that our physiology has evolved in relationship with the plant. Why else would you have an endocannabinoid system?
Yeah.
So, and these receptors are also engaged with other plant medicines like psychedelics, not the cannabis endocannabinoid system per se, but lots of other receptors in the brain that cannabis also binds with are bound with psychedelics and other plant medicines. And we have a lot more to learn. We have a lot more to study. Prohibition has really stunted our growth and our understanding of these plants. And, I hope that we can learn about it in a good way and not just in a commercial transactional way, and that we can learn about it in a good way and share that knowledge so that when people are blown away like you were just now, and you're like, why does that happen? Why does it teach me these things? How can a plant have that transfer of knowledge? And so it's just, we're all connected in nature. We're all part of the same molecular sort of space dust. and so that connection, no matter how subtle and weird and small and microscopic it might be in our everyday consciousness, it's still there. So it's a great miracle plant. It's a great mystery plant. And, by the time 20, 30 years from now, we should know a lot more of the science of why this is happening.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think that at some point, you reinvestigate that question of, man, what is going on with these plants? And like, how am I learning something about myself? Because I think we're all very used to the hegemony of alcohol. You know what I mean? Where it's like you went out, you got a little screwed up, you blew off a little steam, maybe you wake up not feeling so great the next day, whatever. You're not, curing cancer when you're drinking. You know what I mean? But you smoke, or however you get it.
Yeah. Well, alcohol actually, some people report that they get great ideas under the influence of alcohol too. And you've heard all the stories of, oh yeah, this company was started on a bar napkin at a bar when two guys were having a few beers together, or two gals were having a couple drinks together, and so you hear these stories all the time. That it doesn't happen to me that way with alcohol, but and it's just about relaxing, right? It's about relaxing your mind enough to allow the creative part of our brains to sort of overtake the transactional part of our brains. Because the modern world, we wake up in the morning, man, we're transacting all day long, we're on the devices, we're doing our work, we're out in the world, and it's just one thing after another, and you don't really get that opportunity to slow down, calm down, relax, distract yourself from all that. And then an idea has space to come into, when the modern brain is so busy that it doesn't have space for creativity or innovation or new things to come into. And that's why people get all those ideas in the shower, because they have to concentrate a little bit on the actual showering so they clean themselves and don't fall down. And so, they're not, and, some of us are probably thinking about all kinds of things that we have to do that day in our mind. But you hear those moments of inspiration that people have, or when they're shaving. It happens to me when I'm shaving.
Yeah.
And because you have to make sure you don't cut yourself, right? So your mind's focused on that, and all of a sudden enough space is created in that creative part of the brain where you're like, that's the idea I've been looking for a while now. And it's a beautiful part of how the brain works. It really is magnificent, is the only real way to describe it. Just like plants are miracles and magnificent in their own way, boy, the human brain sure is unbelievably magnificent.
Yeah, I mean, it was space dust that got up and started walking around talking to each other. I mean, it's the greatest miracle we know of, the human brain.
Yeah, man, and there's some evidence to suggest plants had a big impact in the evolution of that brain. If you're a disciple of Terence McKenna and the
Stone Ape Theory,
Food for the Gods and all that, and I believe that to be true. So we won't know it's true probably.
Yeah.
But I, when I've tripped and I've thought about that idea, and I've had to communicate with the people around me, and found that difficult on the usual verbal conscious level, you get pretty inventive. And can you imagine if you don't even have the tool of language available to you like our ancestors, our monkey and ape and ancestors did not have that tool available to them, and they had to figure it out. This is water.
It won't kill me.
Are you tripping really hard right now too? Me too. Drink water.
Yeah, no, it's at some point there was a huge explosion in our brain size, and we don't really know what it was. It was probably a confluence of a lot of things, but
yes,
a good chance is that was because we used to trip balls in Africa.
It could be that psychedelics played a pretty big role in this. Climate change might have played a big role in it.
Yeah.
Who knows? There was wars between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. The archaeological record suggests somehow that Homo sapiens made it and the Neanderthals didn't. And part of the brain getting bigger was right around that time. So, who knows? Who knows? Maybe that all those things played a relative role to. Okay, if we want to survive, we have to get smarter.
Yeah.
Real fast. And so we did.
Yeah.
And that might be, maybe that's happening again now with climate change,
Well, we definitely have, how else can we say it? The more we screw up the planet, the less space there is for less people. You know what I mean? Like, we're on our course to, they think that we're going to peak at 13 billion, but maybe we don't, and the more climate change we have, the less space there are for those 14 billion people, or whatever the eventual number is.
Yeah, no, it's horrific to think about what's going on right now. It's hard to believe we're still burning coal and fossil fuels and behaving so badly when we don't need to.
Yeah.
And how do you stop people from screwing and making babies? I don't. It's really hard to do, man.
Probably the hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. So somehow we just have to get smarter, and somehow we just have to get smarter. Like, I don't have children because I was aware of this when I was a young man, and I said to myself, well, there's a lot of unwanted children on Earth. If I want children, I'll adopt.
Yeah.
And, so far I haven't adopted any kids yet, but that was my thought. As a teenager, that was my thought. And I tried to make good decisions. I still had one pregnancy as a young man, even though I was working really hard not to.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things that's just super difficult to reverse where we're at right now and sort of get it to a more sustainable place. What is it? 2 or 3 billion is really what the planet can hold comfortably, I think. So if I remember all those books, those overpopulation books I read, and we're a long way from that happening, so hopefully we could just get smarter, man, or else pandemics and other things will wipe us, will do it for us.
Yeah. And it's happened before. We are, our hubris is great, but we've been down to a couple thousand humans. It's happened.
Well, 25% of Europe died in the Black Plague. That was no joke.
Yeah.
That was serious shit.
95% of people died in America when they came into contact with white people.
Yes, that's right.
95%. Imagine your life if 95% of the people you knew dropped dead suddenly.
Yeah, no, it's impossible to imagine. you would feel so despondent and desperate and lonely and sad. You'd have a hard time surviving, I think.
I mean, it would be the end of the world as far as
Oh
you were
yeah, it's
concerned.
the end of your world. I
Yeah.
mean, if if my wife died or my best friends died or my brother died, it's pretty much starting to be the end of my world. So if you're talking about 95% or even 25%,
Yeah.
right now I think COVID's taken 1 in 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 25% would be more like, oh God, I don't even know what, 1 in 5. I mean, just like incredibly 1 in 4. So just imagine that if 1 in 4 people you knew was gone right now,
Yeah.
or 9.5
Yeah.
of 10 people is gone right now. It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable. So we have to take care of all of these things.
Yeah, but I think that, we're talking about the plant and that kind of interconnectedness. Like, there's no way to, I mean, there is a way, cognitive dissonance, but like to ignore the interconnectedness of things anymore, especially when we're talking about climate or we're talking about, any of those other things that's really important. They're all connected. You're connected to someone in Bangladesh right now by a number of degrees.
Well, yeah. It's part of when we talk about building businesses and cannabis companies and organizations, maybe they're a nonprofit organization, that interconnectedness needs to be part of the plan. Because if it's not part of the plan, then it will be part of the dysfunction. And it really is true, particularly in cannabis, where there's so much interdependencies. Like right now in California, we have way too much weed, far too much weed. The price of cannabis is crashing. Why? We don't have enough dispensaries because all these local people banned it, like they're doing in New Jersey right now. And God forbid they don't do it in New York, but they may very well do it in New York too. And so the supply chain's not, that interconnectedness has been ignored. And when you ignore interconnectedness, you have pain. You have a lot of pain. And we're in a lot of pain out here. And there's no simple, quick, easy turnaround for it because it takes years to get enough dispensaries open. So we're going to be playing catch up. And even now, the people who make decisions politically in California are ignoring the interconnectedness and don't seem to care about it. And if that continues to be the attitude, we're going to continue to have pain out here. So I hope New York does better.
Yeah, from everyone, all the big brains I know, everybody has been echoing the same thing. They think that New York took its time, learned its lessons, especially from California, and that we're looking at something that might be the blueprint for the nation.
I hope so, man. My brother and I are talking about spending a lot more time in New York, maybe even moving to New York. And so we're very hopeful of the framework there. We have the 2 appointees from the governor. Could have been a lot worse. Mm-hmm. Those 2 appointees could have been a lot worse. Yep. Could have they been a lot better? Maybe. But I think those are 2 human beings we can work with. Now we got to see who the legislature appoints.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that's going to take, man. It's a lot easier for one person to appoint 2 than hundreds of people to appoint 3.
Yeah, for sure.
But I hope that decision will happen soon. I think, is it a committee that decides that?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
All right. It's either a committee or the whole darn legislature. Hopefully it's a committee.
Yeah.
Of some kind that decides that. It probably is. And then that body is what's going to decide all these rules and how much respect the interconnectedness gets. And it's not going to be easy, man. This is hard to do right. And I certainly hope whatever mistakes New York makes, they're the opposite of the ones we've made in California. So, that And then if we need, there'll be some imperfections, no question. There'll be some hard things going on that are going to be difficult to overcome. And that's why we have to just keep working, stay creative, stay innovative, try not to fight with each other, even with the bigger companies and the MSOs and all those folks. I hope we can build bridges there and all work together to create a really good framework in New York so that our people can get in and have their spot, and some of the bigger players can do what they do well at scale, and then, hopefully some medium-sized players that perhaps are distributors or perhaps are manufacturers, and kind of in that middle point of the supply chain. Testing labs, I think there's going to be some medium-sized testing labs. So that's what I'd like to see happen, and time will tell.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time out here. So let's jump into some questions.
Okay.
That I had laid out. We've been going over what the answer is to the first one already, but what is a cannabis consultant? What is what you do?
Well, I look at being a cannabis consultant as kind of like being a gardener in a garden. My job is to create the conditions for my clients to grow on their own. So I'm not a general. I don't give orders. I don't tell people what to do. But I do nurture the garden, and I do make sure that the client has all the fertilizer, and that usually means teams and people and talent. I make sure that they have a good atmosphere to grow in, and that means they're compliant and they're legal, and all of that is in order. I make sure that they differentiate themselves from the competition, and do all that sort of pruning work, if you will. And then, I'm there with them every step of the way, watering and continuing to fertilize the garden until that client is up and open and running and have learned how to thrive on their own. So that's kind of a metaphor, right? What do I really do every day is I help people plan their businesses. So I do their pro formas, I do their business plans, I do their decks. I don't fill out license applications for people, but I work with other consultants that do that, so we can help people get their license application in and get their license. And then building the business is what I really specialize in. So getting from the time we get the license to the time that we open the doors of the business. If the client wants me to keep hanging out with the business after we open and make sure that it's tracking according to the expectations we set in the pro forma, I do that too. And what I always try to do with my clients is position them for some kind of exit. So we always talk about exit and how they want to exit their businesses and their companies, or what might be some ideal scenarios for them to exit their business or companies. If they want to be a multi-generational company, then what are the goals that we need? What are the milestones we need to hit to achieve that? Because it's really hard to be a multi-generational company. There's very few companies in any business that can be multi-generation. The same family or the same group owns them for multi-generations. That's a really hard thing to do. But a lot of people want that, want to be a family business for multiple generations. So if that's what they want, I help them do that. But I don't actually do exits. So when it comes time to exit, we engage other people that know how to do that a lot better than I do. Same thing, similar with the license applications. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a compliance expert. I don't read every single state's laws and every single regulation in every state. I just work with other consultants that have already done that. And together we make sure our clients get a license. So that's what I do. I help people with their materials to raise money. I generally don't raise money for people. That's not my area of expertise. I didn't go to finance school. I didn't go to business school. So I know people who do that, and we can certainly access that network. But getting all the materials in shape to put in front of investors, of course, I help people do that, because you always want the business to work on paper. Paper's cheap. Paper's a lot cheaper than renting a building and buying grow equipment, or all of that. Does it work on a spreadsheet first? If it does, then okay, can we build a plan around that? Oh, we did. Very compelling. All right, let's tell a story in a deck. Let's work with someone like Honeysuckle, right, and get the deck looking really good, and then let's take it out and see what happens. And then investors will give you feedback. they're not shy about that, and then you tweak it some more, until you start getting some commitments to raise some money. So that's generally what I do as a consultant, and I can help people find real estate too. I have real estate agents I work with that are licensed, and we can help people find real estate. Right now in New York, I have quite a few people reaching out for that purpose, because the race is on for real estate right now in New York, man.
Definitely. Well, I mean, it's a requirement. New Jersey, you can just kind of be like, oh, we think it's going to be over here. Let's get through the licensing first. And New York's like, which building do you own? And when can you start putting cannabis in it?
Yeah, and the problem with that, with the New York model, is you have to give a lot of money to landlords, and you might not get the license. Yeah. But just to hold the real estate, you have to give them something. Yeah. You might not have to pay them rent every month until you get the license, but you're going to have to give them, some 5-figure check, maybe 6 figures, just to hold the real estate. And so I kind of like the New Jersey model a little bit better. The problem with the New Jersey model is you end up giving licenses to people who can't get real estate. And then bad behavior can happen when people think they own something like a license that they think is valuable, but there's no real estate to put the license in. And so, some bad deals can ensue. But I kind of like that a little bit better because it's a lower barrier of entry. The real problem is the zoning is too restrictive. So all the towns want you to be in like the ghetto or the industrial area of town, and they don't want you to be downtown. They don't want you to be where other retail is. They don't want you to be where residential is. They don't, God forbid you're near a school or a playground or a church. There's a liquor store right next to the thing, but God forbid, and so it makes it so there's like 5 buildings in the town that qualify in the zoning, and there's like 500 people trying to rent them, and the landlords are just like, ooh, the price just went up. And it makes it really hard. So the root cause to the real estate problem is the zoning problem. And this problem that we're seeing with NIMBYism all over. Legalization is really colliding with NIMBYism at the local level right now. And I'm afraid that that's the way it's going to be for a number of years, as long as these states keep giving the local people this power.
Yeah. Which, again, it doesn't compute. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, you can't be around all these places because you've had so many fatalities. Wait. There's not a single recorded fatality. I mean, it's flowers. It's farmers who grow flowers. If someone wanted to put in a field of carnations next to me downtown, great. Sounds like a great idea.
I know. Isn't it incredible? I got run out of Boston. They did their first medical program in 2012, and we, Harborside, wanted to go in. We had some local people who reached out to us, and they really wanted to do something, and so we said, okay. And we picked a location in South Boston, right next to the General Hospital there, in the middle of a very hardcore working class, let's just call it, neighborhood. Some people would call it a ghetto.
Yeah.
There was a lot of methadone clinics around us, just to give you an idea of what kind of neighborhood it was. A lot of homeless camps around us. We still chose that area because, one, the building itself was a good one, and it was one of the few. And the mayor of Boston was against medical cannabis at the time, Marty Walsh. She now works for the Biden administration, and it was literally the only landlord in town that we could really get to rent us a building. And the neighborhood group, which they're right next to the General Hospital, was sort of the dividing line between sort of a middle-class neighborhood and like a hardcore ghetto or working-class neighborhood. And so the people, but it was the same neighborhood group. It was the same jurisdiction. So the people from the middle-class neighborhood ran us out of town because they didn't want a cannabis dispensary there. There was methadone clinics all around there. Their big argument was, we already have the methadone clinics we can't get rid of. Let's not have a weed clinic too. Bizarre argument. I went up in front of them with a PowerPoint presentation. I showed them that kids with epilepsy, people with Alzheimer's, people with cancer, people strung out on heroin or methadone for that matter, get helped by cannabis. We're seeing the data is unmistakable. Do they get cured? Maybe not, but do they get help? Yes. Will it help your neighborhood?
Yes.
Yes. Ran me out of town. We chanting, we don't want it. We don't want it. And they had their city councilor guy there, and he was blowing me up. And then I did the same thing happened in Chicago. Same thing happened in Chicago. Again, I'm in the south side of Chicago, black neighborhood, working class neighborhood. I go to present. This time I think I'm smarter. I bring, at the time, Harborside employed Sue Taylor, who's an African-American woman, senior citizen woman. She was our senior outreach coordinator for years and years and years. I said, Sue, you got to come with me. You got to talk to these people with me. You got to let them know that I'm not trying to murder their children. I'm trying to save their children. And she said, okay, Andrew, I'll go. So we flew out there, had the meeting. It was at a university. It was a community college in the neighborhood. And this local preacher organized this group to come out, and they were worse than Boston. And I thought they were going to hurt me at one point. They were really, really, really adamantly opposed to this. So it was phenomenal to me that in areas that could not need cannabis more, where we wanted to go, we were going to spend a couple $1 million opening up something in these neighborhoods that would have definitely helped the economic development of the neighborhood and probably would have helped the healing of the neighborhood. And we got run out of town, and this is happening all over the country. Just ask any operator in Massachusetts how much money they had to spend to get through the NIMBYs. And the general price tag is $3 million in Massachusetts. Hopefully it won't be that in New York. What I like better is what Oklahoma did. The problem with Oklahoma is they didn't put a cap on the licenses or give the locals the power to do that, but they did not let them ban. So if you have to have a dispensary in your town in Oklahoma, the problem is there's 50 of them. Now, because the cannabis people all flock there to Oklahoma because it's easy to get a license there. It's easy to get a space there.
So what's the argument against that? That sounds great to me.
Oh, the argument against it is you're going to have more cannabis dispensaries than you are Starbucks or, the children or whatever.
That sounds dope.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people feel like it's dope in Oklahoma that, there's so much cannabis and dispensaries around. Cannabis people that consume cannabis and shop in dispensaries are pretty happy in Oklahoma. But I think the supply chain, again, is out of balance there. And I worry they're surrounded by places that have bans and enforcement's not so good. So I worry about diversion in Oklahoma too, and what that might do for the rest of the industry if, it got out of control or it got busted real bad or whatever. We have to be careful of our branding in this industry.
Okay.
We can't let Main Street America be against us. It took us 100 years to get them with us again.
Yeah.
We could blow it real easy. And so, and getting the public policy and the frameworks right is key to this. Because all those NIMBYs who are banning it, the weed's already in their community.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already there.
Sure.
I don't know what they think they're accomplishing by banning it. It's all over the place, okay? Anywhere in New York, you want weed, it's 10 minutes away.
Tops.
And that's if you don't have a good connection. That's if you're using Google. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy. So and that was another argument I would say that would fall on deaf ears. I'm like, it's already in your neighborhood. What do you want to do about it? Keep it underground? Empower organized criminals? I mean,
yeah, that was.
What do you want to do, people?
that was something that Michael Thompson said. He was talking about the lawmakers, and he said that every time you write a new law, you make a new criminal. And that's what they'd done to him. They prohibited cannabis, and he spent 25 years of a life sentence for 3 pounds of weed.
I know it's well, Michael can speak to this in a unique way that you and I can't. But we have far too many laws in this country. We have far too many people in prison in this country. We have far too many people in the criminal justice system in this country. You should have to do something pretty violent and bad to get locked up, not sling some weed, or shoplift something and it's your second or third offense, so you go to jail for a long, long time and you're probably just trying to feed your family. I mean, it's just, you could go on and on about it. So a lot of reform needs to happen, certainly with cannabis prisoners, but really the whole system needs massive reform, man. If not total dismantling, probably totally dismantling it and rebuilding it.
And that's what gets frustrating when you're looking at things from the outside, because you feel like the crazy one. I don't know if you saw that recent video, but there was an Iraq vet who George W. Bush was at some big event and he let him have it. He was screaming at him. He was like, how dare you? Million dead Iraqis. Our tax dollars paid to kill. You know what I mean? Why is he the crazy person, the one who's yelling at him? Why are we all not so mad about the full prisons that no other fucking country has? You can look around. Nobody else has these. The cannabis prohibition, the psychedelics prohibition.
Right, and all the endless wars. Look, there's a prison industrial complex and there's a military industrial complex, and these are huge economic forces that do trillions of dollars of business I don't know if it's every year, but probably every year. And they've been out of control. The military industrial complex has been out of control since Korea, the war in Korea. Then we had Vietnam, then we had Iraq 1, and then we had Iraq 2 and Afghanistan. And, I'm already against the next one, whatever it is. But now that we're not in Afghanistan, watch out, people, because they can only go so long before they do another one.
It would be sad if it wasn't completely true. I'll text you when it happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we can be having this conversation knowing that we're going to get fed some sort of dog and pony show for about 6 months, and then suddenly the drone strikes escalated to special forces, and now it's not really a war, it's totally a war, but like we can pay for it on the credit card and look away.
Yeah, I know. It's really disgusting when all this debate of these social safety net programs that some people in Washington are trying to fund right now, and everyone's screaming about them being too expensive, and yet these wars we fought since Korea, many, many more trillions of dollars we've spent on that and didn't pay for it, didn't pay for any of it.
Yeah.
And so these arguments, well, you have to pay for these social net programs. It's crazy. So,
yeah, if we would have spent the Iraq and Afghanistan money domestically, it would look like Wakanda here. We would all have flying cars. Just by the math, the sheer amount of money that could have gone into our lives personally, just by changing who our representatives are.
Well, infrastructure would probably look a lot better. People's employment and wages would probably, I hope, would be a lot better. And things like maybe we'd be off fossil fuel by now. We probably could have gotten off fossil fuel with the same investment that we made in these wars. Because whatever the trillions, the official number is of the wars, there's hidden trillions they're not telling us about.
For sure. The Pentagon doesn't have to report anything. It's just a check that they get, and they're like, you guys can't know, national security.
Well, they've actually been trying to audit the Pentagon for a number of years now, and they can't do it. And so, yeah, I mean, talk about suitcases full of money going around. I mean, with the military-industrial complex, those guys really do it.
Yeah.
You know, they think
literally
us, quote-unquote, weed dealers have all this cash. Go talk to some of these mercenaries, that are living in mansions and flying private planes and everything like that.
Yeah. So one thing that I definitely wanted to get your hot take on before we end is, what is your guide to surviving / maximizing Expo season? Because it is upon us.
You mean all the conferences?
Just all of it. There's so many right now.
Well, I'm doing a different strategy for the big one in Vegas this year. So in Vegas, I'm going to host a couple breakfasts in my suite. I got a bigger suite, and make it come to me a little bit more rather than trying to run around all over the place, go to all these different events. And so I'm going to try to make it come to me. I'm a little lucky this year because I'm speaking at the convention. I'm moderating a panel, so that will help, raise my profiles so it'll come to me a little bit more. The smaller events, I pick them, like Hall of Flowers is happening in Santa Rosa this week.
Yeah.
Probably won't go to that one. I really want to see everybody, but I've got work to do. There has to be a compelling reason to go to an expo. I'm in California and I'm a consultant. And right now it's really hard for companies that I want to work with to hire me in California. They just are barely getting by. They can barely pay their taxes. They can barely pay for the weed. They just can't get me. They can't get me unless I want to join their team full time, which I don't right now. I'm enjoying being a consultant. So if I go to Hall of Flowers, I probably won't book any gigs, right? I'll get to see everybody, and that'll be wonderful, and I'll give out a whole bunch of business cards, and maybe a few people will call me, but chances are I won't get any gigs from it. Most of the folks I would see there, I'm going to see in Vegas, right? on a social level, because I miss everybody. We all miss each other, after this pandemic. So seeing each other, I think, is a very important reason to do things these days. But you can't do all of them. So my method is there a compelling reason for me to go? 2, can I get there? Is it close by, or do I have to go far, far away? 3, am I going to regret going when I'm done and I have to pay the credit card bills? And you just can't go to them all. But I probably will be going to the Emerald Cups, or I think they're calling it the Emerald Ball this year, if I'm not mistaken. I am going to the NECAN in Atlantic City a week from this weekend.
Awesome.
So I'm speaking there. So again, a compelling reason for me to come. I'm speaking. Another compelling reason for me to come is New Jersey and New York are opening up. Yeah. So the chances of me meeting some potential clients at NECAN is a lot higher, right? And I really only need to close one to pay for the trip.
Gotcha.
To make the trip worthwhile. So that's a really easy equation. Okay, if I make this trip and I book one person, I've got really good return on that investment and return on that time.
Yeah.
Whereas California, I'm very doubtful I'll be able to get even one.
Interesting.
So you just have to be really smart with these expos, because you can go there and spin your wheels real easy, and then you have to pay for all that, and you haven't really gotten closer to your goal. If you're brand new in the industry, you don't know anybody, it's been a year and a half since we've had these expos, and you have the resources to do so, go to them all. Yeah. Do it. Meet the people. Go to the booths. Meet the products. See if they're at the next one. You'll learn who the bigger players are pretty quick. And you also learn about what kind of companies you connect to, what kind of products you connect to, how you might want to build your own, how you might want to differentiate from the other people. So it kind of depends where you are, right? If you're brand new and you're just learning, going to the expos is really, really valuable. If you're an old timer like me, and you have to really pick them carefully. You have to have really compelling reasons to go, because I'm already in the industry. I already have a book of business that's hard for me to keep up with as it is. So, and I've got my nonprofit, and I've got podcasts like this that I appear on. So I already got a lot going on, and I don't need to burn as much time on some of those fundamental early entry tasks like going to the expos. So part of it is just kind of where you're at in your cannabis journey.
And speaking of cannabis journey, right now, what is your favorite method of delivery and strain? What's piquing your interest currently?
Well, I'm really turned on by this new dab device called the Indux.
Okay.
It's from Indux Labs, and the guy's only made like 150 of them, but it doesn't heat any element. It uses magnetic waves to spin around this titanium bullet that you put the hash in a glass container. Then you put this titanium bullet on inside the container. You screw it into this machine. You push a button, and about 30 seconds later, there's vapor coming out of it's like a hookah tube.
Yeah.
That comes out of the device, and you can put the tube in your dab rig and dab, or you can just put it in your mouth and take it that way. I'm really loving that device. The temperature's not as hot. It doesn't burn as hot. It preserves a lot more of the terps. It doesn't flood you with this huge amount of vapor where your lungs get full real fast. It's a little bit more, gradual, and you can titrate your own dose the way you want to. I've been inhaling cannabis for 38 years, so my lungs are I have to be a little bit more mindful of my lungs, and so I find this device it is a great way to take some of these wonderful concentrates that people are making right now. I like the solventless stuff and
Of course.
the rosins and all that sort of thing, but I take sometimes I take the solvent products too. I just make sure they're from producers I know and better, and I always check the lab tests really good on them. But that's a really wonderful new device, and if anyone's in Vegas, they're gonna be on my balcony during my breakfasts, and folks can reach out if they want an invitation. Not hard to find me, AndrewDeAngelo.com, and so that's my newest thing that I'm really getting into. Most of my consumption method is capsules. So, at my age, I like to eat most of my cannabis, and I don't like all the sugar, and I don't like all the calories.
Yeah.
So I just take capsules, full spectrum capsules. I usually use the Blue River Terps ones, and Tony and his team just make a really clean, solventless, full spectrum product that I haven't found a better one on the market yet. So
Oh, that sounds so good. This sounds like really good dessert.
you can get those in Massachusetts really soon. You can get the Blue River capsules really, really soon in Massachusetts. He's opening up in Cambridge, I think in November, and he'll have them in there. So check that out. One of my favorite companies is Blue River.
Awesome. Anybody else that you're really excited about right now that, we don't know about that you do?
Well, I love regenerative farming. So there's a Swami Select. Most of you probably heard of Swami, but Swami Select, Bird Valley Organics. Then my friend Doug Fine down in New Mexico does regenerative hemp farming. Those are 3 examples of regenerative farms I know. And for your viewers or listeners that haven't heard of what regenerative farming is, it basically means you're growing outside, you're using it's beyond organic, you're creating all your own inputs, so you're not bringing in any outside fertilizer or anything like that, and you're burying logs from the local forest under the ground, and you're creating fungi in the soil, and then you're composting to feed all those microbes, and then you plant during the planting season, and you just have to water and put more compost and sometimes some worm casings or something down. And it's a very low cost way of producing super high quality cannabis that I love to smoke. And so I'm trying to talk about regenerative farms as much as I can right now, and encourage people to check out the sun-grown cannabis. Indoors, all the rage right now, but indoor cannabis cultivation is an ecological disaster. Even if you do the cogeneration and the natural gas and the heat capture and all of those tricks of the trade, it's still an ecological disaster compared to, outdoor regenerative hemp farm, cannabis and hemp farming. There's no reason not to do it other than stigma, like we said, and NIMBYism. Nobody wants an outdoor weed field in their neighborhood. But that's really how that's going to be the future. 50 years from now, pretty much, I hope all psychoactive cannabis will be produced that way, should be produced that way, and this whole indoor thing will sort of be in the dustbin of history.
Yeah, it was your brother who turned me on to all of it. We heard him speak, and he was talking about, just get in your car, drive 20 miles. That's how much fossil fuel it took to make the joint that was grown indoors, and it's just like,
I know,
that's
man.
terrible.
Yeah, it makes you feel really bad. So anyway, that's a whole nother revolution that we have to
Yeah.
instigate and win. But I think that regenerative farming, whether it be cannabis or conventional crops, is going to be mandated more and more and required, in order to mitigate climate change. Some of these things that are nice to haves, 50 years ago or even today, are going to be must haves, and it's going to be the law. You have to do it in a way that doesn't harm the environment or cook the planet.
Yeah.
And that's in our future. I hate to break it to everybody, but you think government's intrusive now. Wait, what happens when, we have to stop cooking the planet for real?
Yeah.
I mean, we should have done it 50 years ago when I was a little kid. Is when, the first Earth Day was 1972. So it's like, come on, man. Or was it 71? I think it was 71. No, 71 or 72. 71, I think it was. And come on, man. We're still burning coal and fossil fuels right now, all these years later.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I think in the end, it's our minds and our ability to communicate empathically with other people are what is going to make the difference. Because believe me, I can rant about nuclear power for about an hour straight, or the organics or whatever. But if we're sitting out here on the periphery saying this, and there's no sort of mass adoption, it doesn't matter that there are silver bullets to climate change out there, that there are things that we can implement tomorrow, maybe even cheaper than we're doing it now.
Yeah, I mean, when I put solar on my roof, my electricity usage went down 90%. In the wintertime, I still have to buy a little electricity from the grid, because it gets dark too early or whatever. But it's 90% lower than it was. And, I had an electric car for years, and I'd plug it in during the day when the sun was out. It would charge for free, basically, from the sun. So I had to pay, unfortunately in California, I had to pay out of pocket for, my solar, and I didn't get very good rebates right now because I did it. I should have done it a lot sooner than I did it, but but it's been just a huge change in my life. And, so my personal consumption of electricity and even petrol with the electric vehicle that you plug into the solar, way down by 90%. And it just feels better. And I'm just one little house. I'm just one little house out of 7 billion on Earth or whatever it is. And so if all the houses had that and they were all feeding the grid, you wouldn't need any power plants.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
You literally would not need any power plants. Arizona, Texas, California, Nevada, all those homes could basically feed the grid the way the Hoover Dam does now. And it would be transformative. But the big electric companies like PG&E here, they won't take my excess power. They won't pay me. They only pay me like 5 cents on the dollar for the excess power I feed the grid. But when they sell it back to me, it's 95% more expensive than what I give to them. And it's just corruption, right? Corporate corruption that is not paying me market rate for the electricity my house is generating for them. Now, I see something like that changing in the future. I hope here in California, if Blue California can do something like that. But even here, that those kind of shenanigans are happening. But the people are still doing it. I got it on my roof, and my brother got it on his roof, and it cost us a little money, and I have to pay these people a lease payment for 25 years. But I got to do something that adheres to my values.
Yeah.
And really helps. Really helps.
Comes from the plant.
Right, exactly. If I was not a weed smoker, I wouldn't have that value at all. Not at all, because I remember my values before I was a weed smoker, and they were very much extraction oriented.
Yeah.
They weren't sustainable oriented. It wasn't until you know when I was in high school and I first started smoking weed, the only safe place to smoke weed, you had to go into the woods.
Classic. The fucking classic. And you didn't just go a little bit into the woods. You went like a quarter mile.
Yeah, you had to go wild
safe.
in the woods. You were scared. You didn't want to get caught, right? And
Yeah.
because it was bad. If you get caught, all kinds of terrible things happen to you. So I would go deep into the woods. And sometimes I'd have one friend with me. Most of the time I was by myself. And some of the first experiences of getting stoned was in the woods. And I was surrounded by nature. I always went to this little creek. And that's where I learned about nature. That's where I was like, wow, it dawned on me like, whoa, there's something happening here. What it is not exactly clear, but let's keep smoking weed because it's getting more clear than it was before. And then I started getting into camping and getting into nature, and that's when it all started for me. And you develop that respect.
Yeah.
And that
it's no longer just a resource, it's an environment that you live in.
Yeah, it's just it becomes an extension of yourself. And so the idea of dumping battery acid in the stream I was smoking a joint next to seemed very abhorrent to me.
Yeah.
So that's how this particular tree hugger was born.
I mean, it really would be interesting if a global, adoption of cannabis, which is eventual, however long that is, if that's part of what saves the planet.
Well, I think that's the plan. You've just articulated the great strategy of the cannabis movement. It's a Trojan horse strategy. Get everybody to smoke weed, and then everything takes care of itself. So I've had people challenge that sort of evangelical viewpoint because they're like, well, yeah, but those racists who stormed the Capitol were smoking weed in the Capitol and doing bad things. And I'm like, well, you're right.
Yeah.
So, and maybe they just weren't smoking good enough weed, or they hadn't smoked enough of it, or maybe we're wrong, but by and large, I've known hundreds and thousands of people I've turned on in my life since I was in high school and college. And by and large, the ones that I still know and keep in touch with, a bunch of them, most people have evolved into a place of being more kind and gentle and tolerant and aware of the environment and aware of all these things we've talked about today. So it's, I think there are always going to be bad people, and there's always going to be bad behavior. And sometimes those bad people who behave badly will smoke weed while they do it. It's called plant magic for a reason. And if you want to do some bad black magic with it, you can.
Yeah.
But by and large, I think the plant itself, if the plant has consciousness, which I believe it does, and has intention, which I believe it does, is to sort of create that other effect in more people, so that we can more effectively surround the bad behavior than we are today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Right on, man. Well, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.